In post-Soviet Russia, Lenin is no longer the hero he was. There is another hero that is unlikely to be toppled in the way so many statues of Lenin have been. It is the MiG-21.
I'll be taking the 1960s MiG-21 onto the DCS Growling Sidewinder server, and I'll be fighting modern-day NATO aircraft. Why? Well, why not? I thought this would be an interesting challenge, so I wanted to share my journey trying to do this because it was really not easy. I want to thank Hadwell for helping me with this because he has a ton of time in the MiG-21 and he taught me a bunch. For those that are new to this channel, I focus on multiplayer sim gameplay, so if you're into that, please subscribe. All of you may not be familiar with how much of a mismatch this really is. So for starters, the MiG-21 was introduced in the 1960s, and the cockpit looks like this. Your RWR is basically useless. You don't have any Fox 3 missiles. Your cannon has to be loaded like some throwback to the World War I era. Look, it even makes this nice little noise when you arm it. On top of that, the radar is fixed. It can't move, and it's literally cooled by alcohol. This thing is Soviet as vodka. Meanwhile, I'll be fighting planes that look like this. I mean, look at this thing. It looks like an inside of an Apple store. This thing can maneuver ridiculously. I mean, look at this thing. Meanwhile, in the MiG-21, if you pull too high of an angle, you will starve your engine of air and it'll turn itself off. This is going to be pretty tricky. So getting comfortable and getting kills with this plane wasn't easy, and I want to talk about some of the things that I've learned along the way so you can try for yourself, and then we'll finish the video out with some highlights of some successes. So I'm using my radar. I'm keeping it on actually because I find the extra situational awareness helpful, and you can see that as soon as I crest the hill I see this guy and I IFF and I lock him up. So being able to turn on and off radar, being able to IFF, and being able to switch your IR to radar-based missiles are really important hotkeys to have on your joystick or your HOTAS. We see the contrail here, and it's perpendicular, so I turn and you can see the AOA lights turn on, and this is really, really bad. I ended up learning by doing this that because of the delta wing design, you are basically applying a speed brake by turning so hard, and you slow yourself down significantly. Because of the range of your missiles are so short, losing any sort of E is cutting down an already small range on these missiles. And you can see here that I'm dumping missiles. I'm cycling through my pylons, which you don't need to do, by the way, unless you want to fire salvo shots. Switching through the pylons is useless. A missile will still go off the rail. You only need to be able to switch between IR and radar-based missiles. So because I slowed myself down, I've dumped a bunch of missiles at this guy, and none of them reach him. He basically just walks away. He's in an F-14 and he's totally burning away from me, and essentially I pretty much never catch this guy. I mean, he does turn. The server was a little bit laggy, so I couldn't really get a good gun solution. But the big takeaway from this is be really careful when you're pulling high AOA turns, especially if you're trying to catch up to someone. It really doesn't work. You slow yourself down too much. So you'll notice that I mentioned you should really hotkey the ability to switch to radar-based missiles and IR ones. Going into this challenge, I fully expected to be totally reliant on my AWACS and to not use my radar, and to use IR missiles only. And after talking with some people, especially Hadwell, who regularly fly the MiG-21, I learned that having radar-based missiles is actually really helpful. The R60M is supposed to be an all-aspect missile, but I noticed that it does get a little bit wonky on head-on attacks, especially coming in from low. So this is my typical loadout. I typically take 2 R3Rs on my outer pylons and 4 R60Ms on my inner pylons. And here in this video you can see that I'm chasing after an F-14. I was chasing him for quite a while, and I'm shooting R60Ms right now, and I'm kind of far away from him. he hits me with the Sparrow, and you'll see that I actually did peg him here. And the big thing that you should learn from this is that the F-14 and sometimes even the F-15 require 2 missiles to take down. One's just not enough. So really keep that in mind as you plan your attacks. The last tip I want to tell everyone before we get into a sortie is try to take off with only using mill power. Don't use your afterburners. The reason for that is to save fuel. And the easiest way to do this is, again, just put it in mill power and trim up a lot. You can see that on the bottom on the joystick. You can see the trim moving. If you have a long enough runway and you have enough time, you will get off the ground. Looking at your speedometer, once you get to 320-ish, it's pretty easy to come off the ground, which I'll show here. And the whole reason for doing this is the afterburners use up so much gas, and because you're going to be sneaky and you don't really have full control over the fights, you know, it's getting enough time out there low and being able to choose your fights is really important. So you need to be able to save your fuel. And here, look, I brought my gears up, and yeah, I'm not that fast, but I've saved a ton of fuel, and I'll be able to have more uptime and be able to cruise around more. So just a tip. So let's go into a sortie. So let's dive into the sortie. I'm going to give context up front, and then I'm going to kind of be quiet and let you guys experience the sortie. I'll jump in when I think it's important, and then we will review the Tacview. The background here is I just lifted maybe like 2-3 minutes ago from Michael. This is the western airfield on the Red Fort side, and Blue Fort has been pressing our airfields pretty heavily. I've already died a few times just trying to get to the mountains, so it's been pretty tricky. And you'll see my RWR here on the top right is starting to really freak out a bit, and that's because people are looking at me. So I'm already kind of on edge and getting kind of ready for the hurt to come. And what you'll see here is as soon as I get a very hard tone on me or a very hard lock, I start to maneuver, and I don't really hesitate. I'm going to dive right into the mountains. So I'm going to be quiet now. I'll jump in here and there, and then I'll talk more during the Tacview, so I hope you guys enjoy. So you see RWR is quiet. You saw the map very briefly. I'm basically on my own out here. And RWR went quiet because I went low. And you can see that I'm spamming bogey dope because I want to know where these guys are and how far away they are. That's chaff and flares deploying. So one thing I could have done better here is taking my head out of the cockpit to look around. I mean, yeah, I don't want to hit a tree, but I could have looked around more to see if I could have seen anything visually. So at this point, I assume that I beat an AIM-120 or a Phoenix or something, and then I'm free to hunt again. And I bogey doped, and it said there was a contact at 084 for 50. 50 miles is too far, unless they're like within 20 or 15. I'm not really starting to think about it. And then my radar picks up a target, and this is good because this bogey didn't necessarily come up with the bogey dope. It just popped up on my radar, and I would never have seen this if my radar was off, so that's why it's nice to have the radar on this thing. And I start burning toward it immediately, and there's 2 of them. So let's see what happens. There we can see the contrails. Again, keeping my eyes up, looking around. And at this moment, I'm praying that they're not going to get like a bogey pop-up. Because I'm flying behind them, clearly because of the contrails, so they can't see me. So unless they're paying attention to AWACS, I should be able to sneak up on them. So there's two of them, they're flying in formation, which is a very juicy opportunity, but a little scary because, you know, I'm going to assume that they're flying together like as a squadron. And you can see that the radar contacts just kind of split from each other, and what was going on here was server lag. So this guy kind of warped back, and then he warped forward. You see that? So this is DCS 2.7 in multiplayer. So I lock him up. The vertical lines in the radar, the little vertical ones, are really important to note. You should really get familiar with the symbology here because your missiles will go to waste if you shoot them too early. That was something I was terrible at when I started to learn this. So basically when these vertical lines get past the yellow horizontal ones, your missiles are in range, and then once they get to the kind of the orangish lines, then they're actually in the kill range. And I'm using the radar-based missiles, so you know, obviously he knows. But what I'm hoping is that he's gonna misidentify his RWR and think it's a SAM locking him or something. And you can see I'm full send with afterburners because I'm trying to cut the distance, and you can see that the vertical lines are slowly creeping toward the center. And I've had a tone on him for a very long time, and I haven't fired because, again, like, I want to make sure this is a kill shot. Cutting the turn, or not the turn, but you know, cutting into his flight path. So we're in range. And we're basically at the kill zone, and I let it go. This is an R3R. Probably could have used an R60 here. And that's a splash. But there were two. And I pick him up visually. So that's an F-15 down, so I'm going after the second one. Note that I switched over from radar down, or switched over to my IR missiles, because I've used all my radar-based missiles, which was probably a mistake. I was rear aspect on that guy. You can see the chat noticed the kill. I mean, anytime the MiG-21 gets a kill on a Growling Sidewinder, like, people are commenting, which is great, because it's such a rare thing to see. Notice my angle, I'm not turning super aggressively, and you can see that the distance is being cut really quickly, and this guy's going to be in my range, and because I know I have 4 missiles, I shoot it off a little bit earlier. And the first one actually hits. But again, these F-14s, like, they're tanks when you're shooting R60s at them. So this cloud was really unfortunate because I didn't really want to turn as hard as I did there, because I burned a lot of E. It's an F-14. I mean, he's super fast, but I felt like I had to get down under the cloud quickly, and he just vanishes, and I start getting locked up. I assumed that he reslotted because he didn't want to get killed by a MiG-21. So we're going to switch over to the Tacview, and we're going to see actually what happened. So let's go into the Tacview. I think this is great because right here, you'll see this is when my RWR is going crazy. So I go and dive into the mountain, and I'm chaffing. And I wasn't looking around enough, and look how close these guys were. And they confuse themselves too, and they actually end up shooting each other down. The F-16 takes out the Mirage. And I wasn't looking around enough, so that's a good lesson. Please rewatch your Tacviews. And you can see the warping here because of DCS Multiplayer. And it's my drop tank. I'm going after this guy, F-15. This is an easy kill. And then we go after the F-14, and let's see what actually happened with this guy. So first one hits fine. And then this is when we go through the cloud, and then I'm trying to find this guy. And I thought he had reslotted to avoid the kill. And what actually happened was nothing. He just stayed on the exact same path, and I didn't pick him up visually. And what's insane is because I was corkscrewing so quickly, my radar didn't pick him up. It didn't refresh fast enough. So that's another lesson to be learned. And I kind of stopped caring about my life. Because I remember I was so annoyed. In the moment I thought he reslotted, so I was kind of annoyed. But I want to give credit to this dude because not only did he take an R60 on the chin, but this guy flew all the way back and got back to his carrier instead of reslotting. So props up to him. I hope you guys found this helpful. I'm not the most amazing MiG-21 pilot, but I thought this was an interesting challenge, and I hope this inspires you to try this out. Please like and subscribe, and have a good day. Thank you.